Hello, my name is Fertessa Allyse, and I want to talk about how do you know when your game is ready to be pitched? Something that I like to do when thinking about whether or not my game is ready to be pitched is figure out what do I want from the publisher, and what type of game do I have? Those two work together because the type of game you have can determine how early you start pitching. Um, the publisher's role is going to be to take your game and make it into a sellable product. So you have to figure out, do you want to hand them the product almost done and they just do a little shine to it? Or do you want to hand them something very rough and just see what they create out of it? And you're happy so long as you've signed it, you've got the royalties. Um, this is very important because whenever you sign with a publisher, you can talk with them and let them know, hey, even though I've signed it, I very much want to be a part of the development. I'm very much interested in that process and would love to be included. Is there some way to work this into the contract somehow? Like you could strike a verbal agreement or work it into the contract, but a publisher is not going to automatically assume that once you've signed, you are going to participate or want to participate in the development of your game after the signing. Another thing is, what kind of game do you have? Because I have had a game that I worked on for 2 years, polished it as far as I could, and I got it signed. But I've also had a game that I worked on for 2 months. It was very rough, and I managed to get it signed. And they are two very different games. I think that probably the games that get signed very early on have a very clear indicator of how they're going to sell. If they are very unique, have some sort of mechanic that people haven't seen before, that's whenever you get people signing it very early on in the process. But something to consider is that if you do have a game that is like that and you get it signed super early on, before really the game's identity has been formed, then when the publisher has it, it will almost become a co-designer relationship as you develop the game, because that personality, that identity has to be formed going forward. And if that's important to you, then you will be working hand in hand with the publisher or their development team in order to create that final product. Or, you would just hand it off to them. And when you see its final form, it will be almost entirely different from when you first started. So you need to consider what your game is, what is marketable about it, and what role do you expect the publisher to play versus the role that you expect to play when you sign it. The next thing that I like to do, because I think typically people are going to go the route where they are playtesting over a long period of time and trying to refine it to its best self before they start pitching. So another thing that you want to do is, have a playtesting gauge. It's very easy to get a false positive whenever you are playtesting. And I can attest that you playtest for months, maybe years, and you finally get that one playtest where the stars align and every single playtester loved your game and they played it the way you envisioned it being played. And you think, now I've done it. I've done it and it's amazing. And now it's ready to pitch. Don't do that. You're wrong. I was wrong several times. This false positive will happen over and over and over again, where you have an amazing playtest and the rainbows are out, the sun is shining, and then it will almost immediately be followed by the worst playtest, maybe even worse, because you were so happy and you just knew they were going to love it, but they hated it every bit. That's going to happen. And to stop that roller coaster of emotions, I set this gauge that I need 5 playtests back to back where people are enjoying my game. It doesn't have to be all of them, because everyone will not like your game. Just put that in your head. Everyone will not like your game. It's just not mathematically possible. But that being said, you can still feel if the playtest went well, if this just wasn't a game for them versus did they break your game and you need to fix it. So if you get 5 playtests, 5 good playtests, that is a good sign that your game might be ready to pitch. On top of that, the next thing that I like to require is unsolicited recommendations. So at some point into like a year and a half into the development of Book of Villainy, my first game, I would get people who would come up to my table at conventions and be like, oh, such and so designer recommended that I come over here. They said your game is really fun. Or my friend played your game earlier and said I should come over. I just had a chance. Like I started getting these people coming over from word of mouth and playing my game. And to me, that is the biggest compliment that you can get, when people are talking about your game without you prompting them, without you even being present. And other people are motivated enough to come and find you and shift their schedule to play your game. Regardless of how that playtest went, that is an amazing thing, because something about your game has stuck with another person enough for them to risk their reputation, essentially, and recommend you. So more than anything, you want to take from that something about your game is marketable, and something is like sincerely capturing the interest of other people. So try and figure out what that is, even if your game isn't necessarily where it needs to be for you to start pitching. The third thing that I like to do is have people who have just played the game immediately ask about buying the game. Like, hey, when is this going to be on market? Or, let me know, is there a mailing list? Or, is there a way that I can play again? Those are also very good indicators that your game is in a great spot. When people, again, unsolicited, offer to spend their hard-earned money to buy your game. So if you have all of these things going on, that is a great sign you are ready to pitch. In which case, then it's time for the next step. And that is, how do you pitch? Like, what are the things that you need, right? So I think that it's important to have a sell sheet. It's important to have a 60-second elevator pitch. And it's important to know the strong points of your game. Let's start with the sell sheet. So sell sheets are wonderful. They are resumes for your board game. They are one sheet of paper. They should not be more than one sheet of paper. They should not be double-sided, just the one sheet. And they should have very clear information on the top telling you what the game is, like what's the game name, the player count, the duration, and the age range. You want those all up top, nice and big. Then you want an image of the game, okay? It's cool if you have your art that you've created or paid for. I recommend not doing that, since publishers will have their own artists that they've worked with. But If you have it, then that's fine. I will also note that illustrations don't tell us a lot about the game. Now, there are some cases where they can help, but in most cases, an illustration will just be a nice illustration, but not actually show how the game works or what the actual component looks like. Whenever you're making a sell sheet, the most valuable image is going to be an image of the actual game in play. And with COVID going, you might want to do a screen capture of like Tabletop Simulator. That's totally fine. That's still the game in play. But you want to show the components of your game. You also want to have a list of the components of your game, and you want to break it down by like what the different types are. So you don't want to say the Beast deck is 60 cards and the Necromancer deck is 30 cards. What kind of game did I just make? You want to say that I have 90 standard cards, 6 dice, and 1 player board. You don't want to get too broken down, but what that's doing is letting the publisher see what kind of components you're working with and immediately kind of spitball what the cost would be to create your game. That's what that's for. The other thing that you want to have is a short paragraph describing your game. This is going to be essentially a part of your elevator pitch as to what your game is about, who are players playing as, what is the objective of the game. But again, you want this to be maybe 4 sentences. 5 seems like it's pushing it. Like, I would say 4 sentences. Then you want to have your highlights, which are going to be phrases, maybe a sentence about what makes your game special, what makes your game sell. Like, is this an educational game? Is this a game that's easily learned? Is there some unique mechanic about this game that's just going to immediately grab somebody's attention? Is it table presence? Is it theme? Like, there's so many different angles that you can come from, but you want to be able to capture those in bullet points and list those on your sell sheet. You don't want to have paragraphs on your sell sheet. You don't even want clumps of sentences. Ideally, for me, a sell sheet will have that 1 paragraph up top, the overview, and then some bullet points, and maybe a sentence or 3 about the details of the game. Something that is important with the sell sheet is mastering the art of telling you about the game without telling you in detail how to play the game, because essentially your sell sheet is not going to be a rule book. It can't be a rule book. So you can't get into the details of how to play your game without being very confusing. At the same time, your sell sheet cannot just be buzzwords that sound good but tell you nothing about the game. Like, if all your sell sheet is saying is easy to learn, everybody loves it, kids can play it, all ages can play it, it's about X, like that doesn't tell me anything except the theme is about X, and that you think that everybody could play this. You need to figure out how to convey the broader points of your game, like, oh, you're moving in a rondel, or it's worker placement and it's set into 3 phases, and maybe thematically tell us what the 3 phases are or what they're doing, but don't go into the nitty-gritty of phase 1, this is what you're doing, phase 2, this is what you're doing. You just really want to kind of navigate minimal explanation so that you're keeping our attention, but we're still taking in that information. So Last thing, super important, your contact information. That should be on the bottom. How do they get a hold of you? So you have the sell sheet, and ideally somebody can take 30 seconds, skim it, and know half of the content of your sell sheet. That's the purpose. They look at it and quickly, do I like this game? What does it tell me about this game? They're not going to sit there and read it like they would a book. So that's why it's very important to keep your sentences short, chop them up into different bullet points, even if it technically would equate to a paragraph. Figure out how to chop it up and put it nicely on the page. And it's very important to make sure it is very clear and readable on the page. Do not have images underneath your text. Do not have yellow text on a white background. It's very important that your text is easy to read, and that it puts as little strain as possible on whoever may be looking at it. So do take time to make a sell sheet. It's very important. Many of the events, contests, and publishers will require that you have a sell sheet just to get in the front door. So I highly recommend doing it early, even if just to practice. There are several groups on Facebook that make it a point to kind of critique sell sheets and give feedback. You can also do that on Board Game Geek, and just learn about what's working, what's not working, for people whenever they read your sell sheet. So it's never too early to do that. So let's say that you have created your sell sheet and you're ready to go to step 2. And that would be your elevator pitch, 60-second elevator pitch. I say do the sell sheet first because that gives you practice kind of truncating the things that make your game special. And the 60-second elevator pitch is just more of that. This pitch is really to help you naturally bring up your game and capture people's attention during conversation, because you never know whenever you will encounter a publisher or a person who knows a publisher. And now this isn't an opportunity to be obnoxious about it. Like, you don't want to name drop your game every single sentence, every single conversation. But if you see the opportunity where maybe you're just naturally talking about board games and you can slip in your board game, then this is the time where you have your pitch. I highly recommend being able to hook somebody in the first 3 sentences. You have 60 seconds, but again, this is a time where people have very short attention spans. If you haven't noticed, we switched from YouTube to TikTok. It's just getting shorter. So the quicker that you can get somebody's attention, the longer you can retain it. For example, my very first game, Book of Villainy. My pitch went like this. Book of Villainy is a game where you're a villain, but you're not very good at it. So you're writing a book about being a villain instead. That's it. That's the hook. I figured out that the selling point of Book of Villainy was its theme, its fun theme. So getting that across in those first 2 sentences, that was what helped me get my foot in the door. Any other words that followed for the rest of the pitch were just extra, because usually it was those first sentences that got people to say, you know what, I would love to sit down and play test that game. I went to a pitching event, a publisher speed dating event, where I had 5 minutes to pitch my game. I had to have my game all set up on the table, and publishers would come to your table, sit down, and you had 5 minutes, but you wanted to take less time so that they had time to ask questions and you could answer them. So I figured out a almost 2-minute pitch, and that was what I would lead with. And often that was the point where their eyes would light up and they would be like, yes, tell me more. Um, and, at no other point during the pitch did I really get that. They would just be like, yeah. But again, about the villains, but not very good at it. Tell me more. What's going on here? So all that to say, find out what's fun, what's special about your game, and figure out how to highlight that in the first couple of sentences of your pitch, because your elevator pitch is not going to explain how to play your game, because that's what a rule book is for. And it's going to be very hard to explain an entire rule book in 60 seconds. Now, there are some very successful TikTokers and social media personalities who do explain board games in 1 minute, and you happen to be them, you're okay. But for everybody else, you want to break it down into what is the selling point of your game and hook people on that. And then you can follow with smaller details afterwards. And again, those smaller details, you want to keep them similar to the highlights that you put on your sell sheet. So keep it light, keep it brief and understandable, because this 60-second pitch is not you trying to get the person to buy the game on the spot. That's not going to happen. The 60-second pitch is to get the person to agree to play test your game. And if you get them to agree, then you explain the game when they're playtesting it. You explain the whole thing. So you don't need to do that in your pitch. You just need to convince them that they need to play your game. So you have your sell sheet down. You have your 60-second elevator pitch down. The last thing that I would recommend is get a how to play video. Now, this is not necessary. Like with the sell sheet and the elevator pitch. But I would recommend having a how to play for the purpose of exposure. Also, many contests will ask for some sort of a how to play video. So it's good to have on hand, even though the rules may change. So really just for a point of exposure, I would make one. Something to consider when making a how to play video is that you want to have good lighting and good audio. I can't express enough how important it is to have good lighting and good audio. I need to be able to see you, see the game, see what's going on. And then audio wise, you want to make sure that your environment is clear from extra sounds. You want to make sure that your mic is a consistent distance away from you, so it doesn't sound like your audio is going in and out. You want to make sure you are facing your audio source, and video-wise, you want to make sure that the video is engaging. If I just sat here looking at you, explaining how to play my game, and you don't even see the game, I am essentially just an audiobook version of my rule book, which is highly inefficient. And for kinetic learners like me, that's terrible. I need to see the pieces moving around on the board, if you will. So if it's possible, because not everyone can make a how to play video, but if it's in your skill set, then definitely set up the camera, set the time aside and record how to play. And another tip is you want to record a script. For me, I get nervous when speaking live and I could make all sorts of mistakes and it can be frustrating take after take after take. But something that helps is if you write a script on what you want to say and you can pre-record your audio. Like let's say I'm not going to show my actual face speaking at all. I'm just showing my hands, moving the pieces, do. If you're not seeing my face, then you don't need to have the audio from the actual recording. I can just pre-record the audio and then edit the footage on top of it to the correct timing. And for me, that has been a really helpful way to create how to play videos. So try that. It also helps with getting consistent audio, especially if you have a different thing to record audio than your camera. So yeah, try that out and see if that works. The other last thing, because I said that was the last thing, I lied. But the other last thing that you want to have before approaching publishers is a print and play of your game. So let's say you've pitched to a publisher and they love it. The next step is they're going to ask for a copy of your game. Now, it is absolutely great if you go to the convention locked and loaded and you have your prototype plus 1 or 2 duplicates just in case. But that's also very expensive, and that's not necessary. It's great if you do it, but it's not necessary. The publisher will give you a certain time frame and say, hey, in this next week or next 2 weeks, can you send me your game? Excuse me. And at that point, you go home and you're just going to have to print it out and mail it to them. But it's really great if you already have that locked and loaded and it's the most updated version, and all you have to do is hit print and then go mail it. And I say that it's great to do it beforehand, because when that adrenaline's pumping and you're just like so excited that you have done this thing, this hurdle, and gotten a publisher to ask for a copy of your game, it's very easy to forget something. So easy. Like you wouldn't believe how easy it is to forget like a piece and then send your game, and then it just hits you like 24 hours later, and then you just can't sleep. So that doesn't happen to you. You want to have it prepared beforehand when the adrenaline's not pumping and you're not just deliriously happy, and you can rationally be like, okay, this is in my game, this is in my game, this is in my game, this is what I would need to send so someone could play my game. Boom. So have that ready to go so that if you do manage to get a publisher to show interest in your game, you can immediately move on to that next step and not be afraid of accidentally forgetting things. So we have covered how do we know when our game's ready to pitch and things that you can do to kind of prepare beforehand. But now we're at this other hard area of how do you find a publisher? Okay, yes. Well, the easy answer is you just put yourself out there. And really that's, yeah, you put yourself out there. There are so many different ways to contact publishers. And, I would recommend, if you've heard of Cardboard Edison, and if you haven't, they have a Twitter as well as a website, but they are an excellent resource for information about the publishing process, the signing process, expectations for new designers, and most importantly, a compendium. And this compendium is basically a large list of board game publishers and the types of games that they are looking for, the ways that they like being contacted, and how to contact them. And they update this yearly. So you can sign up for their Patreon, which is like $2 a month, and get access to it, or you can pay a one-time fee, which might be $15. I can't remember. Don't hold me to that. In which case you will have access to the compendium and all of its updates. So once you get this compendium, this is more of a starting point, because when I started my game design journey, I didn't know all of the board game companies. I still don't. There's so many. And if you just try and Google board game companies, it's going to be a struggle. Board Game Geek can be very helpful, but there's just such a plethora of board game companies, big and small, that for me, Cardboard Edison's compendium has been the biggest um, list of companies all in one spot. So that in itself was a resource. As for, the types of games they may be looking for, or whether or not they are taking solicitations, that is something that you will need to double check. So let's say you've compiled a list from this of publishers that might like your game. Then it's your turn to go and look at each of these publishers' websites. And usually they will have a section that will say whether or not they are open to submissions, or if they're not taking submissions right now. That's important. Another thing is you want to look at their lineup. Like, let's say they are taking submissions. Then you want to see, are they even a good fit for you? Because just because they take party games, that doesn't mean that they're going to take your type of party game. You need to look and see, like, are their party games still more gamey, or are they going to be more, I play this card and we all laugh, ha 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 ha. Like, there are different types of party games. Same thing for, somebody has a lineup and they enjoy medium weight strategy games. And you're just like, okay, yeah, I have a medium weight strategy games, but look, you look at all of their games and all of them are these small box medium weight strategy games, and your game requires so many components that it definitely needs a big box. So like, that would almost automatically be struck off their list, just because that is not the structure of their game. Some publishers say, I want this specific box size for every single one of my games. That's part of my brand. So no matter how good the game is, if they can't cut it down to fit in that box, that's not going to fit in their line, just like that. So again, it's not about just how fun the game is. It's about your game as a product, and can they sell it? Does it work within their brand? So you definitely want to look and see, is this part of their brand, so that you're not wasting either of your time whenever you try to pitch to them. The other thing that you want to do is try to find a way to meet this publisher face to face. There are often going to be ways to email publishers. And I can tell you from experience that cold calling like that, you might get a handful of responses back, but more often than not, it will go unanswered. And it's nothing personal. It's just they have a lot of things going on. Some of them are working full-time jobs on top of being a publisher. And an unsolicited email is easy to get lost in the pile of emails they may be receiving. So for all three of the games that I got signed, they were signed in completely different ways, but it all boiled down to putting yourself out there. For a Book of Villainy, I went to a publisher's speed dating event and did the whole 60-second pitch. I also participated in several contests. And so doing that helped me get it in front of publishers, because I had zero contacts in the industry, zero. But doing that put me in front of people, the right people, and I got Book of Villainy signed. For Wicked and Wise, at this point, I knew some publishers, and just by playtesting with different publishers, and it wasn't just playtesting my game, I mean, playtesting other people's games, because a nice rule of thumb for me going to conventions is playtest 5 games for every 1 playtest I get of my game, at least. Like, just put yourself out there, put yourself in games. You don't know who's going to sit down to the table. And then, because you've also sat down and played with other people, they come to sit at yours. Like, they see you sitting off in the corner waiting for a playtester to come up, and oh, hey, one of them might be a publisher. And they're just like, sure, yeah, I'll play. Can it play 2 people? Yeah, okay. but just kind of that organic give and take of playing other people's games, and considering that just as important as playing your own. I think that helped me with getting Wicked and Wise signed very early on. That was a very organic word of mouth. Hey, I can't publish this, but maybe this publisher would like this. And oh man, have you played this game? Like it was a lot of word of mouth and a lot of different people recommending me to other people for Wicked and Wise, which was an asymmetrical trick taker. And that was doing something that hadn't often been seen. So I managed to get that in front of the right people and got that signed. And then the last one, Mansplaining, I co-designed that with Mondo Davis. And we actually did that during COVID. We designed it all through email. We tested it on Tabletop Simulator, and we were members of different digital playtesting groups. And, just being a part of those and people giving good reviews during that, we decided, oh, it's probably ready to pitch. Like every single playtest is just like, yeah, I forgot that I was playtesting. I thought I was just playing a game, which that was a good point to start looking at pitching events. And we participated in a Shark Tank event being run by Wise Wizard Games. And at that event, somebody that was participating actually had a contact with a publisher and thought that our game would be a great fit for that publisher. And the funny thing is, we had cold called that publisher. We had emailed them and never gotten a response. However, this person who saw our Shark Tank pitch sent an introductory email to that publisher, and immediately, like same day, that publisher was just like, let's set up a day to play on Zoom. And after that, we got it signed within a week. So it was all thanks to that initial introduction. Even though we had tried to go like the cold call route and we had been a fit. And so it's very important to take advantage of any opportunities you see to put your game out there, whether it's contests, whether it's pitching events, speed dating events, game speed dating events, or, sell sheet events, just anything to put your game out there, because it's those small connections where somebody comes across your game and tells somebody else about it that, your game can end up getting published. So yes, those were all the things that helped me in my game design journey as a indie designer. And I'm hoping that will help some of you as you reach the point where you think it's time to pitch your games. So good luck to all of you, and thank you for sticking in and sticking it out and listening to my my panel. Have a good one.